Blue Dragon was voted for as an X-File and read-along on my Discord. If you'd like to tag along for future read-throughs and get your thoughts featured in a video, I'll leave a link to the Discord in the description. So without any more delays, as this is going to be an exceptionally long X-File, let's go straight ahead and open it up. Full name: Blue Dragon Ral Grad, also known as just RalΩGrad or Blue Dragon. Start date December 4th, 2006. End date July 4th, 2007. Total chapters 29. Blue Dragon Ral Grad was written by Tsuneo Takano, who aside from this has done nothing else. There's practically no info about them online, which has led some to believe that this is Takeshi Obata's usual partner Tsugumi Oba. There is a basis for this theory, as there's an entire conspiracy surrounding who Uba is, linking him to other mangaka. If you'd like to know more about this conspiracy, then Manga Crash has a great video covering all of this, which I'll leave as a link down below. I highly recommend you check it out. Who we can talk about in great detail though is the aforementioned partner, Takeshi Obata. Obata began his public manga career by publishing 500 Konen no Shinwa in Jump's 1986 spring special, before going on to work under Makoto Niwano as an assistant on The Momotaro. Then in 1988, Obata would publish the one-shot for Cyborg G-Chan G in Jump before making it a series in the following year. While it would eventually be cancelled, it ran for 32 chapters, which at the time was pretty good, especially for a first series in Jump. For his future series, he would start pairing with writing partners, going on to make Arabian Lamp Lamp in 1991, Chikara Bito Densetsu Oni wo Sugimono in 1992, and Karakurizoshi Ayatsuri Sakon in 1995. The first two would last 3 volumes each, and the latter would last 4, all not really hitting the mark, although Sakon did somehow manage to get an anime due to its popularity, which is interesting. It's definitely a series I'd love to cover in the future for an X-File, especially because it got an anime and not many X manga get one. Obata's first real big hit would be Hikaru no Go in late 1998, being the artist alongside writer Yumi Hotta. This work would last a few years and would be especially popular at the time, as would his following and career-defining work Death Note, alongside Tsugumi Uba. The one-shot came out in 2003, with the series following at the very end of that year, arguably becoming one of Shonen Jump's most popular works. With him having illustrated for 2 back-to-back hits, he would once again shift focus to another genre, this time fantasy, likely with many people expecting something special from him, and depending on who you ask, maybe we got that with RalΩGrad. RalΩGrad begins in the dark with 2 voices conversing, Ral and Grad, a boy and a shadow dragon linked since birth and sealed inside this massive egg-like contraption. They have never seen the light, and their only connection to humanity is with their tutor Mio, who teaches them and brings them meals. Outside, the world is ravaged by shadows who have gathered around a figure called Queen Obscura, who is the only one who can birth new shadows. Blue Dragon's extensive world building might be a bit tough for some to chew on at first, but I think it's handled really well. It sets it up like an RPG, fitting since it's connected to one, throwing out a lot of names, but this time most of them stuck for me, and the concept of the 3 types of shadows I think to work decently too. Later on, we'd also find out that Ral is one of 5 special shadow users that can exist in a friend's form. This isn't expanded upon much due to its rushed ending, and honestly I wish they brought it up sooner so we could have had some more intrigue wondering on who the other 4 shadow users are. The main points to take in at the beginning though are that Ral has been stuck with the shadow dragon Grad since birth. They've been locked up for 15 years, and now they are the last line of defense for the kingdom of Spheelite, and perhaps the only hope to rid the world of its shadowy infestation. In the first chapter, Ral is let out of the egg, and immediately he distinguishes himself from other protagonists by attacking and killing his father, who locked him up in this egg, and then he proceeds to rip off Mio's blouse, revealing her breasts. Now is a good time to reveal that RalΩGrad is part fantasy battle shonen and part ecchi. It's very pervy, and depending on your preferences and opinion on Ral, you might either find the series a lot of fun or absolutely insufferable. Thankfully, I really like Ral. He isn't a good person, his actions aren't ones I condone, but his circumstances are interesting and have made him who he is throughout the manga. Plus, he grows as it progresses. There could also be some unseen depth within him. Sealed away for his entire life, he is effectively a child. He hasn't had the means to develop as a person, so he is ruled by his base desires. In Freudian psychoanalytical terms, Ral is ruled by his id, which I think is a fitting way to view the series due to its sexual nature, but for other factors as well. First off, he kills his father. This is very audible of him, even if his reason is sound in a sense. His father didn't love him, he locked him away without comfort for his entire life. His mother figure, Miss Mio, is also the focus of his desire, which, regardless of what you think about Freudian psychology, I think might be an intentional idea being played with here. Ral is also obsessed with boobs. I find this really endearing, especially his concept of tit for tat at the beginning. It's used for funny ecchi jokes, but if you stop and try to analyze it under a psychoanalytical guise, what Ral usually wants is breasts, but also someone to physically sleep with him, not have sex, sleep with him, just to be there for him, like in Mio's case. And knowing Ral has been stuck in the shadow egg for his entire life, only hearing this one effeminate voice, things start to fall into place. Him being focused on breasts, in Freudian psychology, he'd be stuck in something like the oral stage of his development. He's a baby who wants a mother effectively. There's a whole host of issues potentially with this. The way it strips female characters of their agency and equates them with a mother or caregiver figure can be really gross, but in Ral's unique case, he really doesn't know any better. He's scolded as well, and while he is slow, he also learns. So it gives all of these gags and ecchi moments a double meaning, and I think in large part, RalΩGrad is the story about a child and a mother, their development and eventual parting. I think by extension, RalΩGrad is also just a coming-of-age story, a bit of a weird one, but we see Ral grow up, effectively, in this short time span he has, from an infant to an adult, as much as an adult as Ral can be anyway. Boobies! He learns to see Mio as a person and his friends as people, as well as women in general, although he still is a bit pervy by the end. I'm not sure this comes across too well in the manga, but I at least saw it while reading and I appreciate it quite a bit. It's a nice little underlying story that accompanies the grand fantasy adventure quite well. That's the more analytical view of RalΩGrad I have, but outside of that, it's a pretty fun fantasy story. We start with RalΩGrad and Mio as they embark on a journey to stop Obscura. Ral's primary motivator being that he wants to save as many girls as possible, with the reward of boobs being an ever-present thought in his mind. Along the way, we pick up a number of characters who join the party, all with different shadows and abilities. In large part, they aren't very well fleshed out like Aya, but later characters like Kafka act as a nice foil for Ral, being a lot more blunt and prudish. Gannett later on is also a pretty cool character with his massive sombrero. I'm glad he becomes a main focus later on, being one of the other 5 special shadow users using the White Tiger shadow. A lot of battles are quite short in the manga as well, but always are lavishly illustrated. The whole manga is really, and I could spend all day praising RalΩGrad's designs, paneling and general art. What I do like about the conflicts is how Ral approaches them, often being sneaky, lying, pretending to be on the enemy's side, or having a plan that makes them engaging. It does make RalΩGrad stand out somewhat from the usual kind of axed battle manga I've read from Jump's roster. After gathering new party members and fighting off shadows, eventually the party cross an ocean to an area where the big bad is, who's a delight by the way. Obscura is effortlessly evil and sexy, and a perfect villain for this type of story I think. I loved every single time she showed up, and she has a fun dynamic with Ral. They tease each other a lot, and Ral's innocence versus Obscura's comic evilness is a good contrast, but they also share common ground in their love for women. It's in this new landmass as well that Ral has a small arc with Mio where he learns how actually important she is to him, which bolsters Ral and Mio's character, making them reflect on each other and their relationship, with Ral realizing that she has her own individuality and sense of self, and in turn I think that helps give him depth and characterizes him in turn. We then unfortunately get some hasty fights with the other friend shadow users, the Red Phoenix and Black Rhino, before moving on to the final friend type, which is Obscura herself, the clear human, with an ability to kill any shadow just by looking at them. Too bad for her, Ral and Grad have now fused into a being called RalΩGrad. Despite looking like a shadow, they are in fact a human, meaning her power is useless against him and RalΩGrad gets to save the day. Ignore the logistics of this, I'm not sure it ever explains how they do this or how it works exactly, but for the purposes of the story, I think it works pretty well. Using psychoanalytical theory once again, you could surmise that Ral has met his shadow self in Grad, a literal shadow dragon, and has accepted his other side, making him a whole human. Like in the Persona series, if you've ever played any of those games. I think Persona 4 is probably the best example of what I mean. I really like the idea of RalΩGrad dabbling with Freudian and Jungian psychology like this, and despite its runtime, I do feel like it put an effort in to earn this, with Ral ultimately being a more fully formed person and character thanks to the love and support he's received from his friends and Mio. Sadly, part of the deal of beating Obscura was all the shadows returning to a place called Le Noir, their original world, and RalΩGrad must go there as well, leaving everyone behind, including Mio. It's a little messy, but I do like the final page where Ral is forever united with Grad. They are best friends, two halves of the same coin, and now they're together forever in shadow. They could have fleshed out their relationship together a bit more, but it kind of works with my reading. If Grad is just the shadow self of Ral, ultimately it kind of pushes this idea of self-acceptance and self-actualization. It's nice, and ideas of self-love like this aren't brought up too much in most jump manga I've read. All of its psychoanalytical theming add a lot to the manga for me and make it really unique, which I appreciate a lot. So why did Blue Dragon Ral Grad get axed? First off, I want to go over why it probably lasted as long as it did. Following the success of Death Note and the quality of it and Blue Dragon's art, they likely wanted to give Takeshi Obata some time to cook alongside his new partner. It was also a loose tie-in with an RPG named Blue Dragon, which came out in Japan the same week more or less as the manga. An Xbox 360 exclusive RPG though doesn't sound the best fit for Japan, but apparently it did well enough. It makes sense as they had some insane people working on it, including Akira Toriyama on the artwork, Hironobu Sakaguchi on the story, and Nobuo Uematsu on the music, some big Final Fantasy names. The popularity of the game and its relevance might have kept it going for its almost 30 chapters, but as the game's popularity and sales died down, so did the need for a manga adaptation to advertise it. Other factors that might have led to its cancellation might include the excess of ecchi elements, although Jump was pretty fine with the stuff at the time, as To Love Ru was in the magazine already. Then again, the direct competition with To Love Ru might have led to it being seen as an inferior ecchi manga, with fans not vibing with the action elements, and then some action fans not vibing with the ecchi elements of RalΩGrad. The magazine already had ecchi manga and battle manga at the time, so RalΩGrad might not have been deemed worth keeping around. At the time of its ending, there are a couple of other manga I could see leaving before it, like Boku no Watashi no Yushagaku, P2 Let's Play Ping Pong, or Volleyball Tsukai Go Da Go, all manga that lasted a bit longer but didn't seem to have a crazy level of success in Jump. I'm not very familiar with these or the time period of Jump though, so take this with a pinch of salt. With that in mind, knowing other things could have been axed instead, I think RalΩGrad should have stayed actually. It's competent, and while not the best written thing in the world, a few more volumes would have done wonders for its later pacing. It could have been a cooler, shorter series, or maybe could expand its world past Obscura as the final villain, fleshing out RalΩGrad more as well as its extended cast. Let's check what everyone else on Discord thinks about RalΩGrad though. One thing I want to make clear immediately is before we even began the read-along, there was some negative sentiment with RalΩGrad. JC45VD even went as far to say it was the worst thing they've ever read, which did have me concerned at the beginning, and after reading it I can maybe get why people would dislike it, as Shinkoyo's queen brings up Ral's perverted nature could be really annoying, but thankfully most people seem to enjoy the series. Cody praised it for its art and characters, but they disliked some of the breast obsession from Ral. Chizu similarly praised the art and criticized Ral for being gropey. They also liked the villain Obscura though for her audacity and ability to steal any scene she's in, which is something I also enjoyed a ton. Viridian Knight found the series quite compelling, praising the sexual themes for the most part and seemed to arrive at similar conclusions to me, citing Ral's growth as a person to be their favourite aspect. They also point towards the sidecast, the relatively short battles and the lack of what I'm going to call party dialogue to fit in with the RPG theming to be the series' main detractors. But with more time, these things could be ironed out and extrapolated on, which is something I definitely agree with. Harley the Apothecary found the series surprisingly fun, not minding the pervy humour, but feeling it did lead Ral to be a bit one-note as a character. Still, they cite him as a source of enjoyment alongside sombrero guy Gannett. Specifically their relationship with Ral, which I didn't touch on in the story section, but I agree with a lot. They had some really good chemistry together, and I loved their dynamic and would have liked if Gannett joined earlier, or they maybe just removed some characters like Aya and Kafka to give him more page time. Zenomat praised the art again and brought up Castlevania Judgment, which I'll touch on in a little bit. They also liked Ral, stating his innocence and drive to save women was kind of charming. Not everyone seemed to love its ecchi elements, but Ral is well loved as a character at least, and that's nice to see. Finally, Cactus also praises the art, with some of the shadows being the weakest parts of it, while others like Aya's chameleon dog being a highlight. He also liked how Ral and Obscura interacted, which is again great. Something Cactus brought up, which I think almost everyone else did, is its rushed ending, with it quickly speeding to a finale in the final few chapters. I don't think anyone outright hated it, but it was a very obvious and consistent negative for everyone. Next, I would usually go to the Where Are We Now section of the video, but this time I want to talk about the other Blue Dragon for a bit, the video game. I mentioned some of the people who worked on it, notably Akira Toriyama, which instantly puts the two at odds. Blue Dragon's manga and game, and by extension the anime, are very different visually. The differences don't stop there though, as I ended up playing some Blue Dragon for this video. Not all of it though, as I'm not really someone who goes through massive JRPGs. The game of Blue Dragon doesn't follow RalΩGrad, but Shun and his friends, who live in a world very different from the one in the manga. There are no roaming shadows, just monsters designed by Toriyama, like this snake poo enemy, which is just a massive Dr. Slump reference. Others definitely fit some more traditional fantasy RPG archetypes, but there's a surprising amount of tech in Blue Dragon which sets the manga and game apart the most. Early on you encounter a land shark, which is just a massive big drill machine, which ends up leading you through the main story where you find abandoned ruins, technologically advanced skyships, and robots. The titular Blue Dragon isn't even something innate to Shun like it is for Ral. This disembodied voice just tells you to swallow the orb at one point, and that's how Shun and the gang get their shadow creatures.
Swallow the light spheres.
Oh my god, bro.
Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man?
In fact, the only similarities really between the two are the concept of these shadow beasts working with their wielders, but their designs are completely different, and RalΩGrad tends to give them a tad more agency and personality. Despite these differences, I still enjoyed my time playing Blue Dragon. It's a really beautiful game, in part due to Toriyama's designs, but generally the direction, graphics, and set pieces are all really cool. Some emulation glitches aside, like these terrifying sheep people. The combat is pretty simple, but is decently fun when you get used to it, and I went through new areas at a decent enough pace. My biggest complaint was the lack of direction the main cast have, and a lack of character from them. but an adventure across the world with your shadow pals sounds fun even if it's missing a grand story or characters. It could also get better over time, as I only got up to the hospital area, which is very early on in the game. I do think the prospect of having a game following the RalΩGrad manga would be interesting though. I'd imagine it would be a much darker RPG, or even go the way of an action game like Drakengard. The designs from Obata combined with the erotic aspect and darker parts definitely remind me of Yoko Taro's works, and I can easily see him working with Obata on a Drakengard style RalΩGrad game. His work on Castlevania Judgment comes to mind too, a Wii exclusive Castlevania fighting game that came out a few years after the manga. I really like his design work on it, and in this period post Death Note, he seemed to really sink into a darker fantasy phase. On the flip side, there might be an alternative universe where the Blue Dragon manga was closer to the game. Toriyama probably wouldn't draw it, as he reserved himself 2 smaller works after Dragon Ball, but maybe someone with a copycat style could do it instead, possibly deviating at points to focus more on the shadow users fighting each other, as I'm not sure a strict adventure manga would do super well in Jump. As for the anime, I haven't mentioned it as much as I haven't seen it myself, but it seems to stick to the game for the most part, at least in design, although they've definitely changed some things up here and there from my knowledge. It ran for a total of 51 episodes, even getting a second season of 51, which is pretty impressive. With all the differences between the 3 though, and the fact that Blue Dragon never got a sequel despite doing decently well, it does lead me to wonder if they fumbled the bag somewhat with making it a franchise. But a part of me loves how different it all is, and I'm really happy with the RalΩGrad we did end up getting. So where are we now? Takeshi Obata wouldn't stop after RalΩGrad, going on to do illustration work for various Death Note tie-ins for the next year, as well as collaborating with Masanori Morita on the one-shot Hello Baby, and with Nishio Oisin on Uroboe Uroboros. 2 pretty big names, and I'm happy for Obata, as it seemed like in this period he was just having fun collaborating and doing side stuff. In 2008, he would begin Bakuman with his primary partner Sugumi Oba, with that going on to be an especially popular work and second longest after Hikaru no Go. The following years would see him illustrate for more Nishio Oisin one-shots with RKD EK9 and Ugiri. He also worked on more Bakuman and Death Note side projects, as well as a manga adaptation of All You Need Is Kill in Young Jump. Somewhere between all of this, in 2014, he would be the artist behind School Judgment Gakyo Hote, an Axe manga favorite of mine centering on child attorneys. I honestly can't wait to talk about it in length one day as an Axe file. That would be the last time he would be featured in the main Weekly Shonen Jump magazine though, with him going on to focus on slightly more mature work from then on. First with the angel-focused Platinum End in 2015 to mixed results, and in late 2021 he would begin Shouha Shoten with Asakura Akinari, which is still ongoing in Jump SQ, following 2 boys who practice comedy together. Without a doubt, Takeshi Obata is one of the most mangaka to ever manga, with tons of different stories all under his belt, all with staggeringly great art. And with Obata's bibliography finally done, that marks the end to this Axe file on Blue Dragon Ral Grad. It's a polarizing work that on the surface I think is a serviceable fantasy action series mixed with ecchi, but with some deeper inspection I found myself really enjoying its world, characters and themes. I especially like Ral as a character, and I think the manga is a worthy addition to Takeshi Obata's amazing library of illustrated works. If you enjoyed this video, I have a number of other Axe files on various Axe manga throughout the magazine's history, and speaking of history, there's also my History of Shonen Jump series where I go through Jump year by year. Please check them out if you're interested. If you really like what I do, you can also support me on Patreon, where you can be featured at the end of videos with a little doodle like the following people: Kinocha, Cody, Kaizoku Gairu, and Soraquill Zero. Thank you all for being patrons. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Remember to be kind and take care.